got it. We'll call it to order. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. Call them, and committee, your vouchers are in front of you. So this is a voucher day, so sign your vouchers, slide them in as we have our meeting. We'll take care of those. Yeah, welcome back. Hope everybody enjoyed the little short break. Now the fun stuff, redistricting. So we're going to jump right into it, and I think, Joanna, you have the floor.
Good morning. I'm Joanna Dolan with Legislative Research. Just really quickly to kind of set the where we're going. Just planning on going over some of the decisions that could be made between now and the time of redistricting. And I'm going to start with some discussion on the town hall meetings that were held in 2011. In 2011, the Special Committee on Redistricting, which was made up of both the House and Senate joint committees, or standing committees, held 14 town halls across the state of Kansas. Those were in Wichita, Hutchinson, Salina, Manhattan, Chanute, Pittsburgh, Lawrence, Overland Park, Kansas City, Leavenworth, Dodge City, Garden City, Colby, and Hayes. Moving forward, there would be questions for you all to consider as to whether to go forward with those meetings again, how to go forward with those meetings. So which members would be paid to attend which meetings, how many meetings would be held, where will the meetings be held, which locations this cycle, how will they be held, will there be a virtual option, will they all be in person? And also, when will they be held? Will they be held before or after census data is available? I'm sure you all know we have a delay, and so we're not expecting the full census PL data until September, probably the end of September, middle to end of September of this year, which pushes us back past the timeline for the last cycle because those town halls were held between July and October of 2011. And just knowing that if you do it before census data is available, there will be certain things that won't be able to be considered at the town hall, such as population shifts and those sorts of things. And then which committee will hold the meetings? Are you going to plan to form the special committee, the joint special committee again, or are you just going to have joint meetings of the standing committees? How you choose to do that. I'm happy to answer any questions. Of course, these are just probably some of the considerations that you might take up, but just to hopefully give you a little bit more insight into what was done last time in preparation for redistricting.
Many questions for Joanna. I do have, so what, 10 years ago, we were a little post-crash, from the 08 crash, and there were some budget constraints. How did that differ from 2000? It's because mine, if I remember, used to be, I think, everybody in the redistricting committees, both sides, went to every meeting.
I believe last cycle, every member of the joint committee was paid to go to one meeting, and that was usually the one that was closest to their district, for obvious reasons. And then the chairs, there were co-chairs, House and Senate co-chairs. I believe they went to every meeting, and then, but everybody else was just paid for one last time. I don't honestly have that in front of me. There were.
Might go really fast. All right, legal guidelines, Jason Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the advisory group. You have in your packet for today a copy of the legal guidelines and criteria for redistricting that were adopted in 2012. I wanted to draw your attention to those. 10 years ago, this group, the advisory group, reviewed and recommended to the full legislature these guidelines and criteria for when they were drawing maps. These are the exact same criteria that they proposed. They are also the same criteria that were adopted and recommended in 2002. So they've been used in the last 2 redistricting cycles. Obviously, the population numbers there for the equality are based on the 2010 census. If the advisory group would like, we can propose the guidelines and criteria for your next meeting that have the updated population numbers based on, we have those numbers based on the data we have so far from the 2020 census. So we can put those numbers in there. They're slightly different between the legislative and the congressional maps. The legislative maps, states have a little bit more leeway in terms of the population equality. You have a plus or minus 5% under the standard case law, whereas the congressional redistricting, it has to be as nearly equal as possible. And any deviation from absolute equality, you need a justification for that under the case law. Other than that, a lot of the redistricting guidelines are fairly similar between the 2 types of maps, looking for maps that don't have a purpose or effect of diluting minority voting strength, are compact, contiguous. You don't have weird overarching, regions wrapping around, so they're more compact and contiguous. Looking to keep community of interests together, and these maps is another guideline. Also trying to avoid contests between incumbent members whenever possible, provided, and in some cases this kind of has a priority where, you want to make sure you meet the equality first, and then you start moving down the page in terms of those guidelines. And you see incumbent protection kind of falls towards the bottom, and that's generally a view in redistricting, is to put incumbent protection towards the bottom on those priorities. I will note on the back page with the congressional redistricting, there is an added one there under number 4, where they look to try and keep counties whole within the congressional districts to the extent possible while still maintaining that equal population and preserving communities of interest. So that was an additional one that's considered under the congressional redistricting. So if the group wants to review these, again, we can update this set of guidelines with the current population numbers based on a 2020 census and send that back out to the group for adoption at your next meeting if you would like. And I'll be happy to answer any questions this time.
I actually think I would like to just take in the information today if at all possible, and then have discussion. I would like to have that updated. Senator Wilburn.
Yes, we do. Yes, if you like those, Joanna has those numbers at her seat. Okay.
Jason, was there discussion last year, 10 years ago or 20, I don't know, maybe ask Tom, he's probably been here on 3 or 4 of these things. So on prediction of population growth, because, that's what strikes me at the, the federal level. If you set it on this date to the all is you were only good that date, and it gets further and further off the further you go. Did they do any population projection, i.e., Johnson County has obviously grown in the last 10 years, so you're going to have districts up there that are probably plus 10% by now. Any predicting that to where you made adjustments for that now, so you're trying to have the full 10 years be as close to one man, one vote as possible?
You could on the state districts because you have that plus or minus 5%. Typically, usually that cushion is used more for communities of interest and other criteria, not so much as trying to build in, account for for population growth. Like you try and make Johnson County districts maybe lessen the population because you know they're going to grow and add people over the 10 years. I don't really know of any court cases that have called that into question under constitutional principles, but that's not a common redistricting criteria when they go to redraw lines. It's just understood that you have this margin and the numbers will be, you know, non-equal by the time you get to the next census round. Some states do a mid-decade redistricting that is allowed, where you come back in the 5-year mark and redraw the lines out of necessity, or you've had a court case that requires you to redraw the lines. Sometimes that happens, in which case you can consider some factors like that, but generally it's not usually used. And with congressional districts, you're limited to the,
Tied there, but
Yeah.
it seems like if your goal really is the closest you can get to one man, one vote for the longest period of time, you would make those calculations. Further questions? Are there questions for Jason?
we have the numbers on the populations from Joanna.
Thank you. So Kansas population for census this time is 2,937,880. That's an increase of 84,762 from 2010. And if you're curious, the estimates had an increase of about 60,000, so we're up about 24,000 more than projected. That would make House seats about 23,504, Senate districts 73,447, and congressional seats 734,470.
That evenly divisible by 4, so you're going to have exactly that in each of the 4 congressional districts.
I had one other thing, Mr. Chairman, if there are no further questions on that. The other thing the group should probably consider is last time we operated under a practice during the session, the 2012 session, of requiring any amendments to reapportionment bills be what you all commonly know as gut and goes, where you strike the whole map and then insert a whole new map. And this was done to ensure that no part of the state is dropped in the amendment process. If you do it piecemeal, like you're only amending these districts, there's a higher probability of certain portions of the state being dropped from the map and not being covered by the whole redistricting plan. So they did operate under a practice of striking the whole map, insert a whole new map. It wasn't adopted as a formal rule by either chamber, but if the committee would like to recommend to the legislature adoption of such a rule, we'd be happy to work with the group on drafting some proposed language to include in a report to the legislature on that.
One district in a map. If we need to handle that, we'll talk about that and then be in discussions with the House. We want to just do it as a joint rule, or each chamber have its own. Further questions? Seeing none. Jason? Go back to Joanna. Technical guidelines.
Chair, could we get those numbers again that she just gave?
I'm sure she'll be glad to provide this for each one of us, probably in writing at some point.
Would you like to hear them again now, or I can send them later? Okay. Just before I start, we found out there were 36 members on the joint committee last time, so it's quite large.
It's updated there. It's 17. Our plan is to have 9. So that would put 26 if we did the joint being full membership of both our standing committees. All right, please continue.
All right. You also should have a copy of the 2012 technical rules in your packet. I won't go over all of them, but we'll just point out some considerations. First, I want to talk just a little bit about the procedure for map drawing. There'll need to be some decisions made as far as that goes. As Jason said, we want to make sure that we're getting all of those pieces in, because when you would sit down with us to draw a map, you would pick up counties, you would pick up voting districts, but you would also pick up blocks, which are the smallest pieces that we get census data from. And we would want to make sure that none of those were dropped in an amendment situation. I'll also just say that the redistricting bills are bills, and so they go through the legislative process like any other bill does. So considerations of which non-legislators would be able to come in and draw maps with me, since maps would need a legislative sponsor to be introduced. And our office does do about a 4-hour technical review on every map that's drawn. So those are things to think about. Also looking at, we required that whole maps be drawn. You couldn't just draw Johnson County and then let the rest of it fall where it was. You had to draw a whole state map. And then also, as Jason said, the gut and go for amendments, also whether amendments should even be allowed or if it's just going to be all just consideration of single bills. And then also whether or not a physical map has to be drawn for each or provided every time a bill comes to committee or to the floor, because when you get the bill, it's just going to be language. It's just going to say these counties, these voting districts, these blocks are in Senate District 1. So it's not going to make a lot of sense out of context. And last time they did have where you would find like amendment reports for floor amendments and things. There was a column that had maps and those were available on the LI, kind of like amendments would be. The other thing to consider is deadlines. You'll see in the technical rules that there was quite a bit of time required prior to committee meetings and things moving to the floor, just because it does take us a while to process that information, to do the technical review, to make sure that you're within your deviations. And there's usually a racial block voting analysis that's run on that map so that you have that information available as well. So just again, considering how much lead off time you want before things are considered. And then Jason touched on also what metrics you're going to want to see in the database as you're drawing. Are you going to want to see a home seat layer that shows where current legislators live? Population, obviously, what voter registration and election results information, and what other demographic information you would want to see while you're drawing those maps. I'm happy to answer any questions. No, that's pretty quick.
In the House, that will have a bill on its own map, Senate's gonna have a bill on its own map, and then a congressional. Typically how it's been done in multiple cycles.
I believe so, Jason.
I suppose if it's a bill, guys, I mean, you can do whatever you want.
Yes, traditionally, the chambers start drawing their own districts, but then as the session moves on, out of necessity, bills sometimes get combined and maps get combined. The State Board of Education maps each State Board of Education district must be made up of 4 Senate districts. And so the State Board of Education district map typically is included in the Senate district map just for ease of reference there.
Questions for Joanne? Senator Sykes.
So when you were talking about the overlays, is there a way that we could get a digital copy? I mean, I'm not necessarily printing, but something digital with those bills to show the current Senate or House seats and then the adjustments? And I'm sure that has to do with whatever computer.
There are a number of reports that we can run on. Typically, we run them on the final bills. So like if you go to our website, you would see some of that information about, what the districts were in 2010 and 2000 and what they ended up being in 2012. Amy is our tech person.
So, yeah, please, Amy. Follow up or add on question, logistically, what does that look like? Is there a single seat at the computer that everything has to be drawn through, or is there a House seat, a Senate seat, and additional people helping draw maps?
Yes, and that's one of the things I think we're looking for direction from the advisory group on, is how that will work out. I just want to clarify your question. So as Joanna was talking, those blocks are the lowest level. So the blocks have literally changed from what they were or are now. So that overlay, we can tell you that, the new Senate District 12 contains X portion and it's, 30% of what the previous one was. Whether we can get down to that block level, it just depends how granular you're going to want that.
And I guess maybe my question is, you're saying that's kind of more in the final project, not in some of those other like introductory bills? You're saying that's because of the time, it's more later in the process? Or is it feasible to have it earlier?
Sure, we can certainly look at that if that's something we know you want in those layers, that we can certainly see if that's something that can be made available to what you have as your base layer. So as you draw your new maps, you can see that visually. We can certainly strive for that.
So follow-up question, apparently my mic's not working very well. People are having trouble hearing me on the web. So is there a software vendor that we've already been chosen, or is that something we were supposed to choose, or how does that, because I know there's multiple vendors for the process. Amy, is that you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would indicate that the last couple cycles, we have used Caliper as our software vendor. And at this point in this cycle, that is who we've chosen to proceed with due to timing features that we would use that vendor again.
Any further questions? Representative Sawyer.
Yeah, I'll just follow up on what was discussed earlier about the map-making process. As I recall, in 90, 92, and 2002, each caucus had a staff person that they hired that did maps. And then we even each had our own little kind of map room that did that. The last one, I think they would just use legislative research staff. But previous to that, each caucus had a person that they hired and worked on the maps.
So even beyond each chamber, each caucus in the chamber had its own ability to do that?
Yep.
Is the licensing or whatever with the software, is it per seat type of an expense, or how does that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yes, that is a per seat license. What was included in the budget that you passed for this year did include a license, one per each caucus, as well as a computer to have that particular licensure on. And we'd be happy to delve into more of those details if you would like, but you did approve in your budget.
Enough for a seat for each caucus in each.
One per caucus for each
And
chamber.
research?
And research, correct.
Further questions? Seeing none, I think my next subject matter is process, but I think we're actually covering that, aren't we? You covered both of those, didn't you?
Kind of combined those two together.
So we're down to just discussion and next steps, committee. Obviously, we're going to have to get we'll have some updated information from the reviser and research. We would probably be looking for a date in the pretty near future to make some of these decisions to get moving. There is this conundrum of September data, not getting data until September. So that's, a point of discussion. Do you guys think we should be out having meetings prior to actually having the data, or wait and push the meetings into the fall after we have data? Any comments? Senator Wilburn?
Can you hear me? The concern with going early is we'll be confronted with a lot of questions and suggestions as it relates to the population, and we won't have it before us, and we'll look almost inept going forward until we get that data. That's the only problem with going early, I see.
Has that date been confirmed, basically? We're September. There's no chance it comes before that?
Last we heard, they're hoping it will be mid-September rather than the end of September.
Representative Sawyer.
Yeah, how much detail do we have now? Do we know like the county populations right now? I mean, how far down do we have?
So I have the state total and then enough information from the apportionment data to know that we're not losing a congressional seat.
That's it. You don't know, for example, what Sedgwick County is or Douglas County? Okay.
Not officially.
Yeah, I think it's hard to do the public hearings to at least know that, because that's always been a lot of the discussion about gain seats or lose seats. So.
You guys think you'll have time to review data and be ready to make some of these decisions by sine die, which is obviously just a week and a half from now, or would you rather come into June, kind of find out a meeting in mid-June? Well, we'll have those conversations, and basically then at this point, we will announce that meeting at some point here in the near future. Is there anything else that you feel we need to address today, or any, Speaker Reichman?
Mr. President, so this, back to the vendor, so that decision's been made. We're using, we've already appropriated, moving down the, I don't have another vendor in mind as a spec. Thought that was one of the decisions we need to make at this body. This one,
Would you like to address that one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker. So traditionally, that is a decision that is made by this body due to timing. The decision does impact a lot of functional items. We can certainly reevaluate if that's something you would like us to. However, at this point, for both budgeting and functional purposes, we did choose a vendor and continue what we had done last time.
okay, but it sounds like the decision is, you guys made the best decision during the time restraints you had to help us through this process. Okay.
So has that been contracted then at this point?
We have not purchased all of the licenses because that time starts tolling as soon as we purchase those. And until we have data for you to start drawing those maps, so we have not actually purchased all of the licenses. We do have enough licenses so that we can proceed with the portions that we need to do in KLRD.
Thank you for being cognizant of that. Committee, I mean, do you have any, Speaker?
One more thing. I know we had some discussion, it seems like maybe a consensus about waiting for our public meetings to after September. And while we're here, is there a case to be made, anything that can happen if we were to meet earlier? Because this is going to get compressed. Is there any preliminary meetings? I'm not advocating either way. I just wanted to have a little further discussion. If there was some benefit of getting out in the community and getting input, we have to be very clear that we don't have the data that will make the final decisions, but maybe hear some of the guiding principles from the community. Again, not advocating either way. I just wanted to have, while we're all here, have maybe a little more discussion as if there is a case to be made to meet earlier.
Amy, what was budgeted for travel, for example? You know, if we have 26 members plus staff looking at, 8 to 20 meetings, is there, I guess my simple question, is there enough, did we budget enough that the entire committee could attend all of those meetings, or do we need to be restrictive in who gets compensated for what meetings?
Maybe it's something we further discuss our next meeting. I just wanted to keep it on the table.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get that updated information, look at that. Anything further? Representative Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if we wait till the end of September, if we even have enough time to do all the meetings. So I think that we really need that. Do we really need the granular numbers to have those meetings? Because many of those people are just going to be suggesting certain things about their district. Maybe not. Maybe the numbers don't need to be available yet to have some of those meetings.
Representative Sawyer.
I think from past experience, at least I don't know if we get the county number sooner, but if we know this population of a county, how much a county's changed, that's pretty big in that process, that public input process. Having at least that number, because a lot of people will address it.
I suppose if we're doing, we will do, I would think, at least 2 meetings in each congressional district. You maybe do one prior and be back in the district after you have more detailed information. So, well, we'll look at that. We'll look at those and look at getting back. Senator Sykes.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe even this group could do preliminary groups in those congressional districts, and then as just kind of an assess of data, and then the full group possibly later.
Looks like we have a lot of discussion. Joanne, do you have a comment? I'm sorry.
Thank you. I will just also mention that we are not as compressed in our timeline as some states have been. Some of them should have already redistricted. And so the Census Bureau is going to release in mid to late August what's called the legacy files. And those are not the full PL, not the down to the block. And they require some manipulation, but we are hopeful that with some manipulation, we will be able to have county numbers from that in mid to late August.
Truck will be coordinating everybody's schedules, right? I imagine we would need to have at least 2 meetings a month or so for August, September, October, November. When that puts you at least 2 in each congressional district. Well, we'll look at that and have discussion. Anything further from the committee? Seeing none, I see nothing further. We're adjourned.